have to find no more. And we won't have to find no more.
All right, guys, welcome to Eat Sleep Train podcast number 13. We're doing this COVID styles, obviously, because we're in lockdown in Melbourne, so it's all via Zoom. We had an amazing guest for this podcast, Rafael Lovato Jr. He's just amazingly accomplished Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt competitor. Link's going to give us a little bit of detail on his CV because it's rather extensive.
His CV sure is extensive. So Rafael Lovato Jr., second American to ever win the IBJJF Black Belt World Championships, so number 2 after BJ Penn. He's also won the No-Gi World Championships. He's won the World Masters Championships twice. Competed at ADCC. He became the first gringo to win the absolute black belt division at the Brasileiros, which is the national championship in Brazil, which is an incredibly difficult tournament to win. And then transferred into mixed martial arts, where first he captured the Legacy FC title, which is one of the smaller organizations, before signing with Bellator and tearing his way through the Bellator ranks as well, and capturing the Bellator middleweight world championship. So world champion in the gi, world champion no gi, and world champion in mixed martial arts.
So he's all right.
He goes okay. Also an accomplished coach, I should mention. One of the first coaches to take a full team of qualifiers to ADCC, where he took 3 of his students and himself to, I think it might have been the 2011 ADCC. I'm not certain, but he mentions it during the interview.
And this interview was awesome. We found it amazing and some really good takeaways from it. I think one of the things that stands out the most is Lovato is a martial artist through and through. It's not just a sport for him. And one of the things for me that was most striking is there was 2 things actually. One is that he takes responsibility for everything that's going on in his training and in his performances. And the other one was how very committed he is to the things that he's doing. If there's something that he's trying to attain, a particular goal he's working towards, he dedicates his whole self to putting the things in his training, in his life, that need to be there to get to that goal. And obviously we've all got things we've got to work around, but I found that to be incredibly impressive. He's certainly not someone who makes excuses. But yeah, he seems that all the lessons of his jiu-jitsu he seems to apply to his life as well. And that was pretty rad to hear him talk about some of these things.
Yeah, there are a few people that I've listened to and or met that when they start talking, you just stop and want to listen. He reminded me of a lot of John Will. There were so many nuggets and so many valuable bits of information from a martial arts, but also just being a good human perspective that I stayed silent for the majority of it because there were just too many questions to ask. I didn't know what to ask.
Yeah, we obviously had time constraints because he had to go and do things, and we had to keep it a little bit shorter than maybe would have been ideal. Because, and I don't know about you guys, but I felt like we could have been asking questions and hearing him tell stories for 5 hours and still not run out.
All day, yeah.
Yeah, there was so much going on there. Luke, was there anything in particular that you kind of, you've been following Lovato for a long time and a big fan of his in terms of jiu-jitsu and everything else he's doing? Was there anything that kind of surprised you or that came up in that interview that was a really good takeaway for you?
Look, to be honest, nothing, because I've followed his story so closely and I've been a fan of Lovato's for a long time since I was a blue belt. There wasn't a lot, I think, that was new or surprising, but something that I enjoyed quite a lot about the interview, and I think people who are listening and watching will, is how candid he is about some of his internal struggles through the issues he's had around his condition, forcing him to retire from MMA, and issues around COVID, and trying to manage his new academy, etc. And in some ways, I felt like he really opened up, and to see how he has used the martial artist ethic and the martial artist lifestyle to deal with these challenges, I think was something that was really profound and really struck me. And I think it's really good listening. And it's the kind of thing where you want to listen to it again, and then you want to take a break, and then you want to listen to it again.
Yeah. I agree. I think it was amazing hearing him talk about all the various stages of his life, because there's been huge achievements, but there's also been a lot of challenge. There's been a fair few hurdles kind of put in his way, and how he's approached those, what he's done to overcome them, and like you're saying, the internal processes. That's the stuff that I found really, really interesting. But I think for anyone listening to this, they're going to love it. They're going to get a lot out of it, and it's the kind of podcast that you're going to want to listen to a couple of times. You guys smashed it recently at the first comp in Oklahoma.
Yeah, the first IBJJF to ever come to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma City Open. It was this past Saturday, and that was a really special weekend for us. We were definitely very excited and grateful to have a tournament like the IBJJF right here at home, and it was our mission to win that team title and really get to show our work and show what we've been building here for so many years with black belts, that have been with me for, well over a decade. And we did it. And I competed as well. And Victor Hugo, who's living here currently, he competed, and we closed out the absolute together. And I got to achieve my goal of getting my dad on top of that IBJJF team podium, and put him on the top for, kind of recognizing the fact that he's the one that brought jiu-jitsu to Oklahoma. And if it wasn't for him, the IBJJF probably wouldn't even be here, wouldn't have came, this last weekend, because he was the one that sparked the growth of jiu-jitsu in Oklahoma and really just kind of revolutionized the direction of martial arts here in this area of the country.
And that's something that we wanted to touch on as well. Is obviously you've got a really close relationship with your father, and you started your training under him in Jeet Kune Do, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you've transitioned into jiu-jitsu, but you guys transitioned into jiu-jitsu together.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people think that my father was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt when I was born, and I was born into jiu-jitsu. Especially because, I received my black belt at a young age, and everyone knows that he was my first teacher. But like you said, we come from a Jeet Kune Do background. And so he was my first martial arts teacher, but it was all JKD style stuff. And specifically a lot of boxing, because my father was a former boxer. And so I grew up heavily in the JKD and boxing background. And then when my father discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he started teaching me, and we grew up together as kind of like best training partners, so to speak. I did outgrow him pretty quickly. By the time I was 16, I was already starting to get close to 200 pounds. And my dad was only like 150 pounds back then. Yeah. But from 13 until around 16, I was more his size, but we were number one training partners. He would travel and learn and, bring home stuff to Oklahoma and to our students. And of course, the fact that I'm his son and I'm an only child, we would naturally end up spending a lot of extra time one-on-one with each other, going over whatever he learned, or maybe it was me that traveled and went somewhere. And then I would bring home new techniques and stuff. And I would go over with my dad what I learned, and we would just drill and talk about it and kind of put it together and really kind of develop our questions for the next time. The next time one of us got to travel and be around a black belt or whatever, a brown belt, whoever, we would always have our questions ready, and that whoever went off would ask those questions and then come back, and that's what we did, man. That's like how we came up, just just by ourselves, really.
How'd you find the change in dynamic from originally you're the student, he's the coach, and then you start doing jiu-jitsu together, and then you're essentially teammates? Did you find that switch in dynamic, was it even noticeable, or was it just kind of organic?
I would say it was more organic. You know, uh, my dad, he's a true martial artist, and um, he's always trying to learn from everybody.
Mm.
And we were really, it wasn't like I was really teaching him, or of course he was my teacher and I respected him, and he was a head coach of mine as well. Uh, Even for jiu-jitsu, he would help me put together my training, and help me prepare. But we were kind of one single unit. It wasn't him, it wasn't me, it was us. And we were both working it out together. Two minds better than one. And we had different body types. And so things that worked for me, he might have to adjust a little bit, and vice versa. And so we were just students. The first and foremost, we were just students, and we were studying the art of jiu-jitsu, and just doing the best that we could that way. But still to this day, we learn from each other. And he's the first one to jump in and ask questions. And Victor Hugo's been here teaching classes. My dad jumps in, and he's a student. He'll usually end up doing one of my classes per week as well. A lot of times it's on my Thursday morning class. That's good for my dad's schedule, and so he'll come in Thursday mornings and just be one of the guys, and that's great for our relationship. That's when we have our own little mat time together as well. So it's just about always being a student, forever student, and just continuing to learn.
You mentioned that you got your black belt fairly early. Now we know that you didn't finish that process of white to black belt with your father. You ended up being with the Machados for a while, which is our lineage. And then I think through geography, through a change in location, you ended up transitioning across to Salo and Shanji after competing against Salo in a competition.
Yes.
So that it's an interesting thing. Like, it's a bit unusual going to a competition, essentially get towed up by, Salo's no joke. Like, he's a beast. So there's no shame in that at all. But it's an interesting transition to go from that to like, all right, this guy's going to be, and it was Salo that kind of approached you about like, hey, maybe you should.
Yeah. So you're right. We were with Carlos Machado. Carlos was the first, how I say, legitimate black belt to move to this area of the country. He set up shop in Dallas, Texas. And so that was the first time where we could get to a black belt without having to go to one of the coasts, and so Dallas is about 3.5 hours away. And my dad was going down there once a week, every week for like 3 years to do a private lesson, train in the morning class, and then drive right back home and teach at night here at our school in Oklahoma. And so, we loved Carlos. Carlos was an amazing teacher, and we were so lucky to have him come to this area of the country. It made things so much easier for us. And for sure, if it wasn't for that, we would have still been years and years behind. But, Carlos, he wasn't, he's the oldest Machado brother, and his competition days were coming to an end. He wasn't much of a competitor to begin with, and he was already starting a family and very focused on, building his family and his school and his business. And so by the time I got to be about a purple belt, brown belt level, I was traveling all over to compete, but I was always by myself. I didn't really have a team. I didn't have a world champion mentorship, to learn and understand what it takes to be a world-class black belt, a world champion black belt. I was just figuring it out all on my own. and I was still doing pretty well, but especially by the time you get to brown belt, I mean, things get really hard. You're essentially competing against professional guys, people that live and breathe jiu-jitsu. And I was going to school. I was in college, and I had the goal. I wanted to be a black belt world champion. That was my life goal. But
How long did you
I
know
didn't
that was a goal of yours? Was that something that you were aware of fairly early on in the jiu-jitsu journey?
Yeah, I would say the first time I went to Brazil, I definitely, 99, I was 16 years old, was the first time I went to Brazil to compete in the world championships. And it definitely hit me then. But then the next year, when I was 17, was 2000. And that was the year that BJ won it. And I watched that. And when I watched that happen, I said it right then and there. I was like, man, I want to be the next one. I want to be the next American to do that. Like that needs to be me one day. I wanted to win in Brazil, especially.
What belt were you when you were 16 and 17 in Brazil?
I was a blue belt. I was in the juvenile division.
Yeah.
So, I had those goals. And then there I am a few years later, a brown belt in college, but I didn't know how to get from where I was to that level. It was still a bit of a mystery with it being all on me, and not having that mentorship. And so I ended up competing against Salo in 2003. I was 19. I was a brown belt, and it was a no-gi match in the finals at a big tournament, the Arnold Gracie Worlds, which was like an ADCC caliber type tournament. A lot of ADCC champions competed there back in the days. And anyways, we fought in the finals. It was destiny. It was amazing. It was a dream of mine. I knew he would be there, and I even joked about it. I was like, man, what if I get to fight Salo? That would be so cool. I was already watching him when I was 16, 17, in Brazil at the very first World Championship. So he was an idol, and it happened. And then a few months later, I was in Brazil competing.
Wait, can we just back up a bit? Because that's a significant moment, right? He's an idol, and you're actually on the mat with him. You're competing. How did you feel when you're on the mat and you're like, I got to try to beat this guy?
Well, first, I was very intimidated. I was pretty scared. I actually beat one of his black belts in the semifinals. And so I kind of spoiled their party that day because it was kind of like, unspoken that they thought they were going to close it out.
Yeah.
They were definitely the most experienced guys, and they were running through all their opponents. And then I kind of came out of nowhere. No one knew who I was. I'm just an Oklahoma kid, super quiet. And like I said, I ended up beating one of his black belts in the semifinals to get to the finals. And so there was a vibe, and you knew he was out to get revenge and do his job. And of course, he was a big favorite. But I was really proud of myself that day. Of course, he smashed me in the end, but I did okay. I made it like 6-7 minutes, maybe even close to 8 minutes before he finally passed my guard, and so I was really proud of that. And then once he passed, he just smashed me. He mounted me and he choked me with like 30 seconds left. With an arm triangle.
Yeah.
So he smashed me good at the end. But I hung in there, and I did all right. And I think that's, and he could see my character. I was very respectful. I called him Mr. Ribeiro, and I told him it was an honor. And he actually gave me his rash guard that he wore that day. And he lifted me up. We took a picture together. We talked. I talked to Shanji. I took a picture with Shanji as well. And so I made an impression, I definitely made an impression. But that was it. But then a few months later, I was in Brazil and I competed. This was back when there was two, there was the CBJJ and the CBJJO.
Yep.
Nova, you guys being around as long as you've been around, I'm sure you probably remember those days.
Mm-hmm.
Novo União created their own worlds, and they paid prize money. And so anyways, it was awesome to be a gringo, because then you got double the competition experience. And so they were only like 1 week apart from each other. But yeah, you essentially got to compete in 2 world championships. One was the World Cup and the other was the Worlds. And the World Cup was first. And so I competed at that one. I took the bronze medal. I just lost by advantage. I did pretty good, but Salo was coaching his guys, and he wasn't competing. So he was much more approachable. He was just sitting there. And I remember I just got my medal, and I saw him, and I went over, and I just went to say hi, and so I say, "Hey, what's up, Salo?" Da da da. And he looks at me. He's in his chair, and he's like, my brother, and he was, just so cool, so friendly.
That's a very good seller.
Yeah. And he gave me a hug, and he's like, "Oh, where are you training? What are you doing?" Da da da. And I'm like, at that time I was training at Gracie Baja, because the Machado brothers, they had ties to Gracie Baja. In fact, Carlos used to teach a lot of the OG legends of Gracie Baja. Carlos was their teacher when they were like purple belts and stuff like that. And so I was training there, but of course, Carlos wasn't there with me. And, I didn't really feel like no one was taking me under their wing. I would just say that. Like, I felt like I was a bit of competition to them. And so, when Salo was like, "Oh, are you having fun? Do you like training there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's cool, whatever." But he's like, then he said, "Oh, you want to come train with me?" I said, "Yeah, I do, yes, let's do that." Of course, I didn't want to miss that opportunity. And so anyways, long story short, he gives me his card, he gives me his number, and he says, "Call me on Monday, and I'll come by, pick you up from your hotel, and take you to train." And so this was like Saturday or Sunday. So sure enough, called him Monday morning, and he picks me up, and actually takes a couple of my buddies as well, picks us up from our hotel, and takes us to Copacabana, to his academy to train. And keep in mind, the World Cup had just happened, and now everyone is focused in on getting ready for the actual Worlds the next weekend. And so we end up going into this training session where he is running through everything that happened at the competition for all of his competitors, and just like breaking down all the technical mistakes they made. And he spends like over an hour just teaching and sharing all of this very high level competition technique, strategy, stuff, right in front of us, and a lot of people don't understand. I don't know if you guys went to Brazil back in these days, the early 2000s. We were gringos, you know what I mean? And Jiu Jitsu, it was theirs. And it was really hard to get the goods, like the good stuff, to get them to teach you and share with you, the deep things, not just okay, here's the technique, here's, a three or four steps, like without the details, without the whys, without the strategy, the mindset. You could maybe learn some moves, but it was hard to really understand the game,
Yeah.
and there he was breaking down the game for his guys, and really like giving a motivational speech and mindset and all this stuff.
Do you
to
think that
carry
was
them.
do you think that's because of language, or not having a relationship established, or just that what Salo was doing was not that common, that not every coach is breaking it down?
No, it was not common at all. I'd been going there for many years, and I never experienced that. I never had, maybe little moments here and there, but for the most part, we were outsiders. We were gringos, and it was almost like we were either, if we were good, we were the enemy. right? And you couldn't allow us to get too much because they didn't want us to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
And if we weren't good, then, and I don't want this to sound wrong, but like, it's not like this across the board, but it definitely felt like, otherwise we were just sort of the recreational person that was there to spend money, and that was it. You were going to see us for a couple of weeks, and then we were going to be gone, And a
Yeah.
lot of that was just also the nature of Gracie Barra. They were already so familiar with so many, foreigners coming through and being there for a week or two, and that's it, and Baja is a very wealthy neighborhood. It's like the richest area of Rio. And so, it was just a different vibe, and I didn't really travel and do too much at many other schools. I did have some very good experiences. Like, I did end up one time doing some private lessons with Ricardo Laborio, and he shared a lot and taught a lot, but I was just a kid at the time. That was back when I was like 16. So I don't, like I said, I don't want to say it's like that across the board, but at that time, my experience at Gracie Barra, after being there a few years in a row now, was that, it's not their fault. I did fight a couple of their guys at the Worlds.
Yeah.
And so, they saw me as a competitor. I'm there, I'm training with them, but I'm also going to fight against them. And so they weren't giving me a lot of access to the good stuff, and then there we were. I had just fought Salo. Don't forget that. I had just fought Salo a few months ago, and now he's breaking it down right in front of me, and my buddies, as gringos, and we were in on this very personal session with him and his top competitors, and we went there every day that week, and we got that whole vibe that week, and I mean, like, as it was happening, I kind of like nudged one of my buddies next to me, who was one of my best training partners at the time. And I was like, dude, are you getting all this? You see all this stuff he's showing us? Like, whoa, and then I got to train with Solo. And I mean, really just my life changed in that moment, and seeing how he was as a leader, as a teacher. I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And anyways, when I went home, I mean, I remember going to the mall to get to internet, right? And writing an email to my dad, that week, as it was happening. I went to the mall and I wrote an email to my dad. I said, Dad, you'll never guess what happened. Like, you'll never believe this. I got to train with Salo, and he showed me stuff. He would answer questions for me, like, and I just wasn't getting that anywhere else. And so anyways, I kept in touch with Salo, and a few months later, he came to Oklahoma to do a seminar at our school, whenever he was going back to the States from Brazil. And that was it. From that point on, that next year, he's like, basically said, hey, you want to come train with me and my brother and compete together? Like, we can do this. And so he opened the doors to going right in with him and his brother, right into his family, and allow me to, get to be in on all of it and do it with them. And that, I mean, that was it. And, I got to be a part of Salo's end of his career, when he was still like, incredible, just incredible. Of course, he had already won all of his world titles, but he was still just amazing. And see Shanji grow into Shanji, and me and Shanji really kind of, our careers, he was a little bit ahead of me. He won his first world title that year, 2004, when I really first started training with him. And I was still a brown belt. But then, a few years later, we started winning world titles together. And so me and Shanji have basically lived our whole careers out with each other. And like I said, I got to be a part of the end of Salo's and the beginning of Shanji's, when Shanji really became Shanji.
Oh,
I think, Rafael, that's a pretty amazing experience. And I think nowadays people wouldn't understand how scarce, like you said, jiu-jitsu was when you first started, and how a lot of it you had to find for yourself. And then you've set this to become a world champion when you're 14 or 15. You're like, this is what I want to do with my life. You go through the process, become two-time world champion in IBJJF adults, correct? Is that right? Two-time?
One in the gi. I was an 8-time medalist, one gold in the gi, and then 3-time no gi world champ.
Excellent. So that happened. You win the Brasileiros at Absolute, which no Gringo, I believe, had done before that. I think one of the interesting things, that story is well known. It's an amazing story. I think one of the interesting things that people don't know is, or maybe doesn't get spoke about as much. So you get this mentorship from Salo. You see the way he coaches, and you make a transition to become a coach and a competitor at the same time. And you were one of the first teams to take a team of 4 or 5 competitors to ADCC. That was correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
3. I had 3, and then with me was 4. There was 4 of us at the 2013 ADCC, and 3 of us all made it to the top 4. I was in the finals, and one of my other guys took the bronze.
So that's pretty amazing to then become, I guess, in the most respectful way, their solo to a degree. So how was that to transition, to be able to bring up a team and to be able to field such a team to ADCC? How was that experience?
Well, for me, there really wasn't a transition of becoming a teacher versus being a competitor, because just due to the nature of my journey with my father, I was teaching pretty actively since I was 16 years old, just to help, because he and I were of course the most advanced people here at our school, and I'd already had kind of like, because I would go off and I would learn things, I would naturally come home and show my dad. So now I'm sort of teaching my dad what I had just learned. And sometimes I would do that right in the classes, I would come back home or whatever. I'd gone off to California, Brazil, and train and compete. And then I'd come home and I would want to teach everybody what I'd learned and what I'd saw. And sometimes my dad would be like, okay, how about you teach class tonight? And let's see everything that you learned. And so, like I said, I started teaching pretty actively at around 16, and really just taught all the way through. In 2009, my father suffered a heart attack, and that's what led me to actually taking over the business and running the business itself, besides for just teaching and just helping. I became the business owner, to help him and kind of allow him to not have so much stress on his shoulders. And I did that in 2009. In 2010, I won a no-gi world title, my first, together with one of my black belts. And so we became American black belt teacher, student, adult world champion, black belt world champions on the same day. And I did it in my first year of running the business, as well, juggling a lot of different things. And so, I had early success right off the bat of running the school and competing side by side with my own black belts, my own, students. And it's just really just been my life. Like, I didn't really have too much of I didn't move somewhere, and I didn't move to wherever Salo and Shanji were, and just be the competitor, and not have to worry about teaching or have my own students. I didn't do that. I always stayed here at home in Oklahoma, because of, feeling that my heart was here, and that my dad needed me, like he was building something, we were building something, and I couldn't let it go. I couldn't leave it. I had to see it through. I had to see our students continue to progress, and I wanted to be there to help them and push them and motivate them, inspire them, and build our team, and so I just always stayed here, and I've always been teaching, and I don't know any other way. Really, I've been teaching the whole time, my whole career. I've always been here at home in Oklahoma. A lot of times people thought I lived in San Diego because of Solomon Shanji being out there. Everyone assumed that I had spent some portion of my life in California or Brazil. But the reality is this has always been home, and I've just traveled a lot out of necessity.
And then at some point, you've decided that you wanted to pursue MMA.
Mm-hmm.
So reasons behind that, was it just simply that you wanted to challenge yourself further, or were there other reasons? And how did your experience transitioning to MMA and trying to bring your jiu-jitsu to MMA, how did that go?
Yeah, so it was a few different things. Number one, I knew I always had to try MMA. I felt like I was kind of bred into it. JKD was very much like the first MMA, the first mixed martial arts. That was Bruce Lee's philosophy of taking the best of multiple martial arts and making it your own. And so I kind of came up in that world, and of course I had done many years of stand-up training before I ever found out about jiu-jitsu. And my dad's philosophy, his mindset when it comes to martial arts is everything is about developing your ultimate self-defense system, and always having a practical approach. Back in the days of our school, in the early days when we were building our jiu-jitsu program, to get a blue belt from my father, you had to have at least a baseline foundation of striking. It was a Valet Tudo. The name of our school back then was Lovato School of Valet Tudo. And so our curriculum was a blend of, it was basically MMA. It was striking, takedowns, and jiu-jitsu. And so when students tested for their blue belt, they would have to do, of course, they would have to show and demonstrate a foundational level of striking, and then they would put the gis on and demonstrate a foundational level of jiu-jitsu, and then they would spar in jiu-jitsu, and then at the end of it, they would take the gis off, put on little gloves, and have to spar MMA with our highest ranking guys, and they would do MMA and show that they could handle themselves in a real fight, and at the end of it, they would get their blue belt. They'd put their gis back on, and then we would tie a blue belt on. But that's what I grew up in. That's what I grew up in. This was my his philosophy of martial arts. He didn't want a student that could, do jiu-jitsu, but maybe he was a little concerned that if a real fight happened, they might not respond the way that he would like. He wanted everyone comfortable with getting hit. He wanted them to know how to close the distance, clinch, take down, and do jiu-jitsu with strikes. It was so important to him. And like I said, that's what I grew up in as a kid. And the only time that we ever did no gi, to us, it was weird. There was no reason to do jiu-jitsu without the gi, unless we were putting on little gloves and we were going to fight, and so until I was a brown belt, actually that competition when I went against Salo as a brown belt in no gi, that was only my second no gi tournament ever. Up until that point, the only time I ever did no gi was to do MMA, and we had an MMA team back then. My father was the head coach of. And I grew up training with him. I was doing MMA since I was 16 years old, putting on little gloves. And it was very normal to me. But then, of course, I had my goals in jiu-jitsu, and I just, focused in on that. And I never really went the MMA route. Obviously, I was just trying to make history as an American in jiu-jitsu. But I knew that one day I had to, because I literally came up in it, and I had to know what I was capable of in that scenario. I'd never been in a real life altercation or anything like that. So literally my first MMA fight was my very first fight ever in my life. And so towards the end of my focused jujitsu years, I started just not feeling the same fire. I wasn't as inspired, and the gameplay was kind of getting under my skin a little bit. Like the new ways to stall, 50-50 was really becoming a big thing. And there were just some things that were turning me off a little bit. It just didn't feel the same. And then I started to feel myself wanting to fight. It's like, man, I'd rather just fight now, than to do a jiu-jitsu match. I want to fight. I want to be more in control, not the points, not the referees, not the decisions. I want to be more in control of winning or losing. And so this was right around when I was like 30 years old. And I said, okay, it's time. It's time. I gave literally all my 20s to jiu-jitsu. I got to a place of like, I'm grateful for what I've achieved. There's no what ifs, anything like that. And so it's time for me to move on and do this now while I can. And so then I made the transition. And it was very exciting for me. It was just what I needed, because it brought me back to being a white belt again, and really just being a student and tapping into my whole martial arts journey. To be honest, jiu-jitsu is still just a piece. It's not everything, because I had my, from 0 until 13, 14 years old, that was JKD under my father, and that whole martial arts foundation that was planted in me. And then came along jiu-jitsu. And even in the beginning of jiu-jitsu, there was a lot of MMA involved, because of the way my father ran our school. So for me, like, I feel as though I'm a martial artist. I'm not just a jiu-jitsu practitioner. I really try to embody the martial artist mindset and approach. For me, MMA became this incredible journey of exploration, of discovering who I was as a martial artist and putting my whole life together. And so now, my dad's in my corner for my fights. I have my my jiu-jitsu teacher, or teachers, Salo and Shanji, being a part of my MMA journey. And then I'm bringing in my Muay Thai coaches, my wrestling coach, literally everyone that's had an impact on me in my martial arts journey is now coming together for my MMA fights. And that's when I really just kind of fell in love with MMA, because it really came down to the fact that I got to spend a lot of time with my most favorite people,
Yeah.
my most loved people. And we were all on a mission together. And, in jiu-jitsu at that point, like, maybe I could learn some new things, or the evolution was still there, but it was very little, of course, because I'd already all the best guys multiple times, and now I'm in this new sport where now my evolution is happening, and I feel it like drastically, from every fight. Each fight, I feel like, oh man, I'm a new person. Now I'm this level. Now I'm this level. Now I'm this level. and it became very addicting. And yeah, that was it, man. And then we set our sights on winning a world title. And you know, I made my debut in 2014, and then in 2019 we did it inside of 5 years.
Which is a pretty huge achievement, what you've done through Bellator, and some would say unexpected as well. Like if you look at things on paper, that fight with Musashi, that's a tough fight. And most people, I think, are familiar with that fight, and probably with what's happened for you afterwards. So one of the things that's pretty significant about your story is this moment where everything kind of just like gets stopped very, very suddenly, and it's taken away from you. It's out of your control. That I can't imagine the significance of that at that moment, like at the peak of everything for you, and then like what was that experience like, and how did the experience that you've had coming through the martial arts journey allow you to manage what's actually happened, and then obviously you've transitioned back into competing in the gi?
Man, you know, it was definitely very, very difficult. For sure, the toughest thing I've ever had to go through in my life. But a lot of times people don't know that, or they get confused as far as the timeline of when I discovered it before the fight, you know? And so it was already a fear of mine, because I didn't get approved for that fight until 2 weeks before the fight. So I had already had to kind of come to terms with the possibility that it was going to be over before I even had that opportunity. And you know, everything that we went through in that camp, oh my gosh, it was like you know, a life's worth of emotions, and this up and down roller coaster of, you know, stuff, and just drama, and doctors, and commission, and blah 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 blah, and trying to train at the same time and stay confident. And literally I'm training. It was the worst camp I'd ever had. Like, I was doing the poorest in my training than for any other fight. Like, I was losing rounds all the time in sparring and training, and it was just terrible. It was so difficult. And it wasn't until the end, when I did get finally approved, that I had a little bit of a surge of positive energy. But I was still dealing with that injury that I had, and you know, it was just heavy. But of course, for me, I felt like it was destiny. I talked about it in the Joe Rogan show.
Yep.
You know, all of that adversity that we went through in the camp prepared me for the adversity that I was going to go through in the actual fight. And I had already like, if I didn't really want to be there, you know, then I wouldn't have even made it there. You know what I'm saying? The fact that we wanted it so bad is what allowed us to get approved to get to that fight to begin with. And so knowing how much I wanted to be there and what I was there for, and really knowing it, you know, and having all that time to reflect and kind of ask all the questions and literally go through my whole life's journey of martial arts during that camp. You know, all those things were on my mind every day. When I got hit with the news, when I'm going to doctor, and I'm just thinking it over, when I'm looking at my scans and I'm trying to think, what am I doing? You know, is this the right thing? Am I going to hurt myself? Blah, 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 blah. You know, I came to terms with, hey, this may be the last one. You never know, whatever, but I need this opportunity. I need this chance. I need to know that I fought for a world title, and I tested myself against one of the best to ever do it. And so that's what made us successful in that fight, especially when it came down to the fifth round. That's how I was able to dig deep. So all that being said, I had already gone through a lot.
Yeah.
And then I just assumed that we were going to be good to go. It's like, all right, now I'm the champ. I got approved. Surely we're going to be fine from here on out, you know, and I'm going to get to defend this belt. And we're going to ride off into the sunset, and I'm going to have a great legacy as a champion. We deserved it, like all these things were in my mind. But Europe came back later, and they continued to study my scans. It's such a rare thing, like, to be a world champion in a combat art, a combat sport, and have this disease. It just never happened before. And so that prompted them to keep talking about it. And they had a panel of doctors that continued to look at my scans, and, they were discussing it in the case that maybe it happens again. And then they decided that, what, you shouldn't have fought, and we won't let you fight here again. And I got that news in November, whenever I had already signed the contract, and I was already in camp set to defend my belt in January, in a rematch. And so then when I got that call, I'm freaking out, and, and I'm like, I immediately get on the phone with Bellator, and I'm like, hey guys, I just got this call from the European Commission, blah, blah, blah. The doctor's there, and there's no way I can go through another camp not knowing if I'm going to get approved or not. We need to do this now. And so we end up talking to the California Commission. I go out there to UCLA, see doctors, blah, 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 blah. And I end up really seeing a doctor who has a lot of experience with my condition, and it says the same thing as the doctor in Brazil, that he thought it was fine. The locations of my cavernoma angiomas are very favorable, not near anything serious, is about as good as it could get without having any symptoms, no issues, nothing. The doctor said that we don't see a problem with you continuing. And so then me and my team, as my manager, my coach, we're at UCLA seeing this doctor, and we immediately scream and celebrate, and I start crying again, and I'm like, yes, it's going to work out. It's going to work out, blah, 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 blah. And so then we send everything in. The doctor gave us a letter and everything. And then we're just waiting. And it isn't until December. So a whole nother month of being on edge, trying to train and continue a camp, not knowing. And then it wasn't until December that they finally came back and said, no, we're not going to approve you. And then it's like, once again. And then, man, one more time, I'm just an emotional mess. I'm literally like just with my fiance, and I'm just like, screaming out like, why, and I'm just so emotional. But it was out of my hands. It's just, and I had to accept it, and it was a whole thing, I'd been lying to so many people near me, close to me. Keep in mind, my family didn't even know up to this point, because I didn't want them to worry about me if I was to continue fighting. I didn't want them to know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so just after a lot of more talks and all that stuff, finally it was just like, okay, I need to come out with this. I just need to get it all out at once, on a platform where everyone's going to know, and they can hear my side of the story, and and hopefully try to help people and create an awareness, and also get some more doctors to hear my story and want to come in and help. And so anyways, the last year and a half have been pretty tough. I went on the Joe Rogan show, and then I announced my indefinite retirement, kind of being forced into it, because I can't get approved. And then my mind was like, all right, I'm going to focus in on my academy. Now I'm not going to have this big stressful mission of fights and MMA and defending a belt and all this stuff. And I just opened the academy of my dreams, at the end of February
When you say
29th.
when you say open, you relocated your existing academy.
Yes. This
Ah,
place
wow.
right here.
Epic.
It's literally the school of my dreams. And I'm not gonna lie, it was MMA that really helped make this possible. The money that I was able to win, and it was only, it was not bad money, but it was about to actually become really good money as the world champion, and that was a big part of why I got this school because I could finally afford it. And then, I'm thinking I'm going to make a certain amount of money this year fighting as a world champion. And then all that went down, and I'm like, okay, all right, we'll stay positive. We still have the school of my dreams, and I'm grateful. I did achieve my ultimate goal. I got the fight of my dreams. Things could be worse. Like, what if my condition was so bad that, because I'm reading about other people that have the same condition that I have, and, they're having seizures, paralyzed, vision, in a wheelchair, unable to walk, things like that. Going into comas. It could be so bad. And so I'm like, okay, look, I can't complain. I need to be grateful that I'm just alive. I'm able to do what I love. I have the school of my dreams. My career has been amazing. So I'm just going to teach and live life and be in my school. And then 2 weeks later we close, because of the pandemic, 2 weeks after my grand opening, we had to close on Friday the 13th. And so it's been a rough year. It's definitely, it's been one where, you definitely just have to breathe, stay calm. Like someone's smashing you, you just have to breathe and say, things are going to get better. I'm going to escape. I'm going to escape. I will escape. I will escape, and just stay calm. And,
Rafael, sorry, can I interrupt? A lot of that, a lot of just what you've been talking about speaks to your character, and you have admiration like the world over. With a lot of people thinking of you as someone who embodies the sort of ethics and just everything that it is to be a martial artist. Where do you think that comes from? Is it like your coaches, your dad, just something that you feel like is inherently in you? Just how did that develop?
Well, first off, I'm very, very thankful for that admiration and for people to look up to me in that light. And that's actually been a big part of what's gotten me through all of this. Because I feel like, if there are people looking up to me to help them stay strong, I have to stay strong, and I have to put that positive energy out there and be an inspiration and, just really embody that role. And that's something that I definitely found even more during quarantine, and, dealing with the pandemic and everything. But if I was going to pinpoint, the source of all of that, of course, I'm going to say my father, first and foremost, because he's the one that taught me how to be a martial artist and showed me what it meant to be a good person and what it means to be a man and take responsibility, and how to admit your faults and be a student and just learn and grow. And I literally approach life as a martial artist. Bruce Lee is quoted saying things like that. What I know about how to live is basically just what I know of how to be a martial artist. It's the same. And I'm also just so blessed to have had so many amazing martial artist teachers around me throughout my whole life, from Richard Bastillo and Danny Inosanto, two of the greatest martial artists I feel have ever existed. Two of Bruce Lee's top students, rest in peace, Richard Bastillo. We lost him just a year or two ago. Danny Inosanto was still going, and that's an amazing, amazing man. And then, into Saulo and Shanji Ribeiro, two of the greatest Brazilian jiu-jitsu minds that have ever existed, that are also on the martial artist wavelength. You know, they are their vision is much more expanded beyond just jujitsu. You know, it's a martial arts perspective, a martial artist approach into my Muay Thai and MMA coach, Mauricio Amado, who's a first generation Rafael Cordero black belt from Shootbox. You know, he grew up training with Shogun, Anderson, Vanderlei, you know, all these legendary guys. And look at Rafael Cordero. You know, that's one of the most amazing minds of martial arts that has ever existed. And him, my coach, Mauricio, and his brother, Andre Dita, are two of Rafael Cordero's finest black belts that have produced numerous champions. But, you know, I'm just a product of my environment. And I feel a lot of that energy has attracted these people to me. And I think that I have that energy because of what my father instilled in me as a child. But, you know, going back to what you said, like, and the timeline of things inside of quarantine, you know, here I am. I'm not an MMA fighter anymore. You know, when you think of your identity and who you are, you know, the last 6 years of my life was a mission to become an MMA World Champion. That was my mission. And that's every day. That was my focus. Every day was to get myself one step closer to that goal. And then I achieved it. And then the next goal was to keep that belt as long as possible. But all that was lost. And then now I'm struggling to understand, okay, who I am. And then I come back to, okay, well, I still have jiu-jitsu. I'm still a teacher. I'm a school owner. And then I'm about to make my return to gi competition and at the Pan Ams and stuff, right when, you know, the pandemic hit. And then that got put on pause. I had to close my school, and I'm kind of lost a little bit, you know, okay, I can't do anything that I love right now. And, you know, the biggest thing, MMA, that whole, you know, transitioning out of that, what I had was jiu-jitsu, but then now that was taken away from me too. And so I definitely did a lot of soul searching, especially that first couple of weeks of when everything closed. And it was the, you know, the martial art mindset and understanding that, hey, at the end of it, I also have this other thing of being an influencer, you know, and being a source of positive energy for people, you know, through social media. I mean, of course, I take it in a much more direct approach, obviously, day to day teaching and being around my students. I always try to give them inspiration when I'm on the mats and I'm teaching and I'm talking to them. I try to bring in that conversation of how everything we're doing on the mats applies to real life. But now I can't do that. My school's closed. And so I really kind of found this, you know, social media influencer role. And I fell in love with it. You know, I tapped into it more and more than what I ever have. You know, there have been plenty of times in the past where I would stay off social media for days, even a week or more, because it wasn't that big of a deal to me then. It was more about my missions and the people that I can touch, you know, in real life, so to speak. That was much more important to me. But then when all that got taken away, I definitely tapped a lot more into my teaching role and my influencer role on social media. And that helped me a lot. It really did. It helped keep me positive, and it kept me moving, staying in shape. I would show videos of me just doing the row machine by myself or doing body weight workouts and just doing whatever I could. I started sharing a lot more in my posts, a lot more about my history and my journey. And I think people noticed it. I think it really made a difference for some people. I got messages, and I'll joke about it. I tapped into my Tom DeBlas, you know, because he's so good at that. He really takes that on, and now I've kept it up, but now I'm back to jiu-jitsu as well. And I've been kind of sharing my, you know, my challenge of coming back to the gi, You know, it has not been my focus for, you know, these last years because it was all MMA. And I had several years where I didn't even do any gi competition because my MMA career was going the way it was going. It wasn't worth it. I couldn't fit in time for it. I couldn't focus on it. And the gi that I did do was the Master Worlds in 2016 and 2017, where I'm going against guys, you know, more my age, and they're not tough. There's definitely some master guys that are, you know, can still compete at adult, very, you know, at the highest level. But you know, the pace is a little slower, and it is what it is. And so now it was like, all right, I need a challenge. I'm the kind of person that always has to have a challenge. And I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could get back to adult level, you know, the highest level of gi competition. And I've had some ups and downs, you know, you can see. But the point is for me is that I'm still living the life that I believe in, you know, challenge myself. All right. I've been away from the gi for several years. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to do it anyways. I have to, you know, and through that, hopefully it inspires some people and it makes me better. I'm learning all over again, trying to keep up with the new games and the new stuff everyone's doing. I have Victor Hugo here inspiring me and helping me, you know, get to that level once again. And it just keeps me young. The same way I went to MMA at the end of Jiu Jitsu, of my Jiu Jitsu time, where it just wasn't inspiring me the same way. Now I'm back and I'm inspired all over again, you know? So I just try to stay inspired and keep pushing myself, and things are going pretty well, you know? Yeah. Okay. I lost to Barbosa. I lost a really boring, kind of stalled out tight match against Tex not too long ago. But I've still defeated a couple top 10 guys, and I just double golded last weekend here in OKC. And like I said, the point is, I'm going to challenge myself one way or another and trying to use that to inspire other people. And now, you know, I got a couple other big matches coming up. I'm going to go back to Brazil and compete in November at the BJJ Stars together with Victor. And that's it, man. Just trying to do what I love. But I'm just so happy that my school's back now. And we had, like, I was telling everyone, like, there's going to be something at the end of this that's going to make it all worth it. You know, when we first started coming back from being closed in the quarantine and all that back in June, July, I was telling all my students, look, there's a reason for this. You know, it's only going to make us better. There's going to be a way that we grow and get stronger, and you know, there's a purpose. And then the IBJJF announced the Oklahoma City Open, you know, and it was just the same way I always preach, you know, like, just stay positive, understand that something good can come out of every difficult situation. And then, you know, we had this amazing weekend last weekend that was literally a dream come true, and was just so meaningful for me and my team, my father, and all of our history. So, you know, can't complain. Life is good.
I think it's also pretty amazing to see how you've combined your sort of reinvigoration in the gi with your newfound sort of social media, I guess you could say mentorship, you know, influencing people with sort of what seems to be your mission to promote timeless jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on your Facebook group, etc., and I'd really like to hear you explain your concept of timeless jiu-jitsu, what it means to you, and what you think it has to offer the jiu-jitsu community broader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was something that I discovered inside of quarantine. You know, as I said, when I was doing all this self-reflecting and you know, two things came about. I started a book, and I'm working on that, and that was a big also push into tapping more into my social media role, because it's like, all right, what do I have to say? You know, what am I going to put in the book? And how can I start doing that little by little on a daily basis with my social media? And so the book is not going to be just a martial arts style book, though. That's going to be, you know, something that anyone from any walk of life can pick up, and hopefully it helps them and teaches them and inspires them. And then I started to think about, okay, well, what do I have to say in the actual jiu-jitsu world? What do I want to leave there? You know, what's the mindset? And Timeless Jiu-Jitsu came about, and it was a little bit accidental too. Whenever I had my first match back, finally in May. It was in May when Fight to Win first came back. I jumped on one of the first cards. Finally got my gi match, and I was victorious in that one. And when I got interviewed on stage, I forget who it was. Maybe it was Hal. It was one of the Flow Grappling guys, Hal or Mike. You know, and they're like, "Oh, that was typical Lovato style, classic, you know, mount, cross choke." And I said, "Yeah, timeless jiu-jitsu. You know, that's the timeless jiu-jitsu." And then it really kind of, oh yeah, that's the thing. You know, for me, it touches on several different things. Number one, timeless for me is never ending. You know, number one, it means we're learning and growing forever. You know, you're a jiu-jitsu student and practitioner forever. You don't, like, we don't stop when we're a black belt. I'm still learning, still evolving. I mean, you're a forever student, and there's never going to be a moment when you're going to have it all down, you know? And so, you know, timeless, always learning, always growing. And then there's definitely, for me, a focus on a certain style of jiu-jitsu, you know, that I believe in and that I try to express every time I compete and I'm on the mats or I'm teaching, whatever it may be. And after so many years, I feel like I've grown to understand more of what works, you know, forever, you know, no matter what your physical capabilities are, you know, and your age, you know, quite simply. You know, there was a time when I had, quote unquote, the young, fancier game, you know, and then over the years, I molded myself more and more to go back to these certain things, these certain positions, and these certain techniques that I felt were just always there for me. They were successful. They didn't put me in risky situations. They were easier on my body, and you know, I grew to fall in love with them. I enjoyed them. You know, the mount wasn't always a part of my game. Pressure passing wasn't always a part of my game. My guard I've done millions of different guards throughout my career. But now I've gone back to these certain guards that I feel are, that they just work, you know, and they don't put me in risky situations where I need to be flexible or I need to have really strong grips. You know, your hands, your fingers, they take a beating.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, there's a certain style, but then within that style, I feel like there's a few kind of key words. All right. It's going to be simple, forward. All right. Which is something that can be lost a lot nowadays. Not everything is really meant to go forward. Sometimes it's to stand still, you know, literally slow the game down for both people, not just for the other person, but also for you. It's hard to progress seamlessly in some of these positions that people play nowadays, you know. So simple, forward, precise, pressure. Pressure to me is something that we all need to have, especially if you want to be successful for a long time. Because when you have pressure, you can slow the game down, you know, you can hold somebody, and you can fire off very high percentage submissions. because it doesn't need to happen inside of a transition, scramble, blah, 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 blah. When pressure, you can fire a very strategic, high percentage submission, because they're dead meat. They're cooked. They're ready for you to finish them. And like I said, timeless. So transcendent. It lasts forever. And there's been a number of people that I feel, especially from my generation, who embody that. Romulo Bahal, Hajar Gracie, Lucas Lepre. These are all guys I won world titles with that have gone on to be successful, well into their 30s. And of course, my teachers, Salo and Shanji, timeless jiu-jitsu to the T. Shanji doesn't get more timeless than Shanji. My goodness, how many ADCCs has that guy done? And no one really beats him. You know what I mean? Like, he's still always right there. And so they've inspired me, and that's what I want to be known for, having that timeless jiu-jitsu, and I want to pass it on to as many people as possible. And so I had the Facebook group, and I'm also like 80% done with my new website that people will be able to be a part of, and putting together so much awesome material for that. All things that 2020 helped me figure out and gave to me, even despite all of the hardships of 2020, it's still been good.
I feel it's a pretty inspirational story, man. Like, there's so much that's happened, and we've both got a list of mile-long questions, and we know that we're going into this. We had 45 minutes, and we've already gone to an hour and a half. There's so much more that we can talk about, but what would be really cool is if people want to, like, we all follow you, we all follow you on Instagram and Facebook and read your posts and all that sort of stuff. I've had the great fortune of knowing Sanji and Salo, particularly Sanji, for 15 years or so. So I'm a little bit surprised in some ways that our paths haven't crossed. I've trained with Sanji a bunch, and it's been fantastic in the San Diego gym. But it's been an absolute pleasure to actually be talking to you. If people want to hook up and follow you a little bit more, Facebook, it's just Rafael Lovato Jr. You've got an athlete page, Instagram as well. Is there any other ways that people could grab hold of you or hook into some information from you? Because what you're saying, there's some fantastic stuff that you're saying, and there's so much of the martial arts that's going on here, not just the jiu-jitsu, which is something that is important to us as well, with the way that we approach jiu-jitsu and dominance as a gym in general. We're trying to help people become better at life.
Yes.
I feel like those things.
That's the number one.
I feel like this is what you just mentioned as well about, this simple, forward, precise, kind of like timeless approach to jiu-jitsu. It seems like that's something that you can very easily translate off the mat. Especially the simplicity in this idea of forward movement all the time. It seems like something that you've done with all these different situations that you've been in. The other thing as well that really struck me early on in the conversation that was key was responsibility. You said you take responsibility for your own training and for what's happening and for getting where you need to go. It's great. Like, these messages are fantastic, and it's awesome that they're out there so much. When's the book happening?
Man, I'll be honest. It's been a new fight. It's been a new fight, man. It's a challenge. It is a big challenge, with so many things going on, especially now that I'm active competing again, and we're trying to get the school running as it should. Pre-COVID, of course, it's such a different playing field now. So things that were working aren't working the same, advertising wise and whatnot. And so there's a lot of things on my plate, but that's kind of the Lovato style. I joke about it. It's never just one thing. There's always multiple things going on. And now I'm so thankful I can do seminars again, not everywhere, but in quite a few places. So I'm starting to travel more. And quite honestly, I just haven't been able to put as much time into the book in this last month or so. that I was in the previous months. Quarantine was great because I couldn't do anything. And so I got a lot done in a short period of time for the book. And the truth is, it's in a great place. It has the direction. But it's realistically, it's probably going to be spring of next year. I would say March, April-ish, before it's done.
Not far away.
Yeah, I mean, a year is normal, right? I would say a year for a book is pretty normal. But I like that it's there challenging me, because I know that at the end of it, how good it's going to feel when it's finally done. I think about things in that way. When you're in camp and you're grinding and you're in the middle of, all that sacrifice and your body and you're hungry and all this stuff, I always think about the celebration. Well, nothing's going to feel better than when I get my hands raised, and I get to go on a vacation and eat whatever I want. You know what I'm saying? So I'm already thinking about that for this book. So it's going to get done, and I'm going to be so proud of it when it is. But yeah, it'll be 2021, hopefully spring, early summer at the latest. But like I said, I have other projects, more stuff's coming out. I'm filming again for BJJ Fanatics. I'm putting stuff out for them, and everything that I do for them is going to be
BJJ Fanatics.
Well, I had a pressure passing system that I launched last year at Top Gun Devastation. And then this year, just recently, because I couldn't travel there. And so they helped me set up a camera and everything that I needed here at home. And I just released a butterfly guard series that I really love. That's one of those things that I feel is timeless jiu-jitsu. You can do butterfly guard forever, and you can grab a belt and people can't break that off, so it doesn't hurt your hands. You don't need to be flexible for it. Butterfly guard it's forever. And I use butterfly guard a lot. I actually just used a little bit of it last weekend. I posted a video of me hitting a butterfly guard sweep in one of my matches yesterday. But I just did that, and I'm already working on my next series, which is I'm calling the Kimura seat belt. It's about a specific grip, like a seat belt with a Kimura grip, and it's going to have some very nice things to it. I'm about halfway through that, and then my goal is to get at least one more done. I think I'm going to go to open guard next, and have that done by the end of the year, so people can snatch those up during the holidays and everything. But everything that I filmed for them also is going to go on my Timeless Jiu-Jitsu website. So,
awesome.
People will have access to it all there, plus so much more. But going back to what you're saying, first, thank you very much for this opportunity and for the kind words about what I have to say and all that. The other thing about Timeless Jiu-Jitsu, for me too, that I didn't say, is the fact that it's stuff that it encompasses positions and techniques and mindset that works in every format, and now that I've competed in literally everything, I feel like I understand, like MMA made me a better jiu-jitsu artist, a better jiu-jitsu practitioner. Maybe not in the sense that I could put the gi on and go win, worlds or whatever in the gi, because it's not gi, but there's still jiu-jitsu, and it's a different style of jiu-jitsu. And so, going back to what I was saying, like when you look at these guys, Shanji, Hajar, whatever, people that I feel like have Timeless Jiu-Jitsu, they can compete effortlessly in any rule set, any format, gi, no gi, and MMA, and and almost make it look the same. If you look at my game, no gi and MMA, I'm still doing the same stuff, more or less. And so that's another thing that's really important to me, is just taking all my experience and all in this jiu-jitsu life, martial arts life, and trying to, pass it on and say, look, guys, this is what has worked for me. This is how I did it. After doing it other ways and the wrong ways for so many years, this is what I know works and is what, helped me be successful. So, but as far as, I want to go back to the group, as far as people following me, I would love for people to join my Timeless Jiu-Jitsu Facebook group. You can search it on Facebook.
We'll try to link it
or
up in the
just,
description if we can as well.
yeah, or they can just type in Lovato, Lovato, jrfans.com, and that'll send them to my Facebook group. It'll redirect. And otherwise, yeah, they can search it, or they can find the link that you do. But otherwise, I'm probably most active on Instagram. That's probably the next best place to follow me. But inside my group, I try to share some videos and talk about some other things that I don't do on Instagram. It's a little bit more personal, but that's another thing that I'm trying to stay active with. There's a lot on the plate, but doing everything I can.
Yeah, man, it's been an absolute pleasure. We really appreciate you taking the time, especially when it is so busy. And you do have a lot going on. Final thing, are you appearing anytime soon in any fight to wins or anything else?
I will be in October. So I just did this IBJJF. It hasn't been announced yet, but I am going to do a fight to win in October. It'll be in Philadelphia. It's looking like October 23rd. And then November will be the end of my competition year. I'm going to finish things off in Brazil. To me, that's the best. I love competing in Brazil. I wish I could have fought MMA in Brazil. That was definitely a dream of mine. But Jiu-Jitsu is next best thing, and I'll be fighting multiple-time world champion and legendary competitor Sergio Moraes at BJJ Star on November 4th.
Yeah, that's an awesome match.
Yeah, big super fight there. Victor Hugo is also on the card. So we kind of started our year together, and now we get to end it together. So I'm super excited about that. And I'm finally going to do my first Brazil vacation. All these years I've gone to Brazil. Every time I've been there has been for a fight camp, training, or to compete. And then I always go right home, and this will be the first time after the BJJ Stars, I'm going to stay in Brazil for like another week and a half, and I'm going to actually just enjoy Brazil. So I'm super excited for that. But that'll be the last thing I do this year. And then I'm hoping, shout out you guys there in Australia. I've only visited Australia one time in my life, and I had an amazing experience. It was beautiful there, and the people were so friendly. And I've had people emailing.
When there's not an apocalypse.
Yeah. Of course, I'll wait until all that's over with. But I've had several people reach out to me and inquire about seminars there. So I'm hoping
it'd be amazing.
Next year to finally get that set up and do a tour around Australia.
That would be awesome, because a funny little story, when you came out last time, I believe I was probably a blue belt at that time, and I was amazingly excited to do your seminars, and my partner also contacted you to organize some privates. And everything was going great, and I blew my knee like 2 days before. And I've been shattered ever since. So definitely next time you're out, I'll be on that as much as possible.
I think that was 2015.
Yeah, so maybe I was a purple belt. Yeah, 2000, somewhere around then. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll definitely pack out seminars in Australia. 100%.
Well, I look forward to that, and hopefully getting to meet you guys there at those and train.
For sure.
You will. Awesome to have you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank
All the best.
And we won't have to cry.